about one more applause for Roundhouse?
Thank you.
So, for those who don't know me, my name is David Klein. I'm the city manager here in Independence. And welcome to an evening with Abe on this particularly special occasion of his birthday. And welcome to Maxine's Ballroom. We were fortunate to have a shot at this facility. We last minute changed. We were going to be at the high school auditorium, but instead we are here. We're very pleased to be here. This is a great facility owned by Bob and Laura Archer from the Ash Creek Village downstairs. So it's great. We're pretty happy with that. So just to let you know a couple other things before I get into the script of this a little bit. If you know people who couldn't make it this evening, or you would like to have another round of this opportunity at 1:30 this Saturday at Rickreall, is that correct, Felicia? At the Polk County Museum. So again, another chance to see this show one more time. Being as we are in April 1865, we would ask that you take away and turn off your cell phones or silence them. They're not fit to the occasion. And we are at the end of the Civil War. It is April 1865. So everybody needs to be in part and understand where you are and what you're doing. This is a presidential press conference. Audience members are journalists at the time. The president will speak for 30 minutes and then take questions. We hope you have some good ones, journalists. The questions should be the sort that a journalist would ask of a president. They can ask about anything they cannot ask about anything that took place after April 1865. Or President Lincoln won't know what you're talking about. The President of the United States.
I'm so pleased to see so many members of the journalistic community with us here this evening. I know a lot of you have complained that I never talk about myself. But you see, I've never wanted my personal views or my personal history to be an issue. But I don't wish my reticence to be an issue neither. And so this evening, with this terrible nightmare through which we have been struggling for 4 long years, so nearly at an end, I'm going to break with the president a little bit and yammer about myself, reluctantly. I say that, I hardly know where to begin. Begin at the beginning, I reckon. I was born February 12th, 1809 in Hardin County, Kentucky. I grew up on small farms there and in southern Indiana, and then later as a young man in Illinois. They were all hard work and little reward. My folks, my mom and my pa, were strong anti-slavery people, so I guess you could say that I took that attitude in with the very air that I breathed as a boy. Now, I didn't care much for farm work. I'll tell you the truth, I hated it. But I realized if I was going to make anything else of my life, well, I'd have to make something of myself. Now, I wish I could say I did it through long years of hard study in school, but the truth is, I don't reckon I spent more than 1 year altogether in one classroom or another. Still, somehow, by the time I'd come of age, I had learned to read and to write, and to multiply, too. Well, up to my 3s anyway, that's as far as I got. And I decided I was going to take these very modest skills after I'd tried a couple of other endeavors as a surveyor and with a dry goods store. I decided I was going to make a lawyer myself. I didn't go to law school neither. I did what they called reading the law, serving as kind of an apprentice in a law firm until I could join the bar and start my own practice. And along about these same years, I was in my 20s, well, I decided that I wanted to become a public figure. So I ran for the Illinois State Legislature. I won 3 terms there, and later a single term in Congress, because some of us members of the Whig Party, which I belonged to back then, we agreed we'd take turns serving a single term back in Washington. But when I came home from that in 1848, well, I figured that political career was over. If anybody asked me, I told them I was through with politics. Politics were through with me, maybe. But in any case, I reckoned that political career was done. Done and over. I went back in the courtroom, me and my partner, Billy Herndon. And we did well. Had a house built for my wife, Mary, and our boys. But you know, over the next few years, this problem of slavery, which had plagued our union from its inception, started to turn into a crisis. When the Supreme Court of the United States declared that no black man had any right, that any white man had to respect in a court of law, and they intimated that perhaps no state could constitutionally outlaw slavery. Well, I began to think maybe there was something more important than railway rights of way and patent law. So after nearly 10 years out of office, I jumped back into politics with both feet. Filed for the United States Senate against Stephen Douglas. Now Douglas, you see, he had helped to tear apart the Missouri Compromise, and that was a series of measures taken really to limit the growth of slavery and keep this union together. And by helping to tear that apart, well, you might say I had a bone to pick with him. So he and I, we traveled the state, laying our case out before the people of Illinois in a series of debates that, well, it went something like this. I'll bring this forward just a little bit. Well, yes, ladies and gentlemen, now it's taking a lot to get those old war horse out of the stall. I seek an office, senator in the national government in Washington. But I never thought that I'd be seeking. And we've got to talk about an issue that I had hoped in this year of 1858 would never again be a national matter. Now, slavery is an evil. But we are not responsible for it here in the state of Illinois. We long ago banned slavery. Now, neither the President or the Congress has any authority under the Constitution to interfere with slavery in those states where it exists. But now the extension of slavery into those territories not yet even organized as states, that's something else again. Like most of you here, I reckon if we could just stop the growth of slavery, yeah, it's going to wither away and die on its own. Now, I know my opponent in this series of debates and in this election, he and his supporters, they're always saying, now all this about slavery extension, that's just a minor matter. Minor matter. I ask you, sir, how many legs would a sheep have if you called a tail a leg? Can you tell me? Well, you couldn't tell me? 5? No, not 5.
1.
But only 4. Because you see, calling the tail a leg don't make it so. Don't mean embarrassing. You of all people. Calling a tail a leg don't make it so. And calling this a minor matter, well, that don't make that so neither. Now, I read a lot from slave owners saying that, well, slavery is beneficial to the slave. Well, maybe I've been looking at things all wrong. Maybe we should start slavery over again right here in Illinois, and I know how we'll do it. We'll start with volunteers. Anybody here want to be a slave?
I would do it if it was for my country.
For your country, you might. Well, you don't need to be a slave for your country. Now, I've been asking if anybody wanted to be a slave for weeks now. It's been mighty slim pickings. So we'll start it another way. We'll start it with those who would enslave others. Now, if they want to tell us how beneficial slavery is to the slave, well, let's try it out on them. See how they like it. As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a slave owner. I know my opponent says that I'm being two-faced about this issue. Two-faced. I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, do you reckon that if I had two faces, I'd be wearing this one? Listen to our Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Now, how can a slave consent to the government over him? What we need to do is to re-adopt the Declaration of Independence and those powers and policies and harmonize them. And you know what will happen if we do? If all Americans, North and South, join in this great and good work, well, we will not only have saved this union, but we shall have so saved it as to make it and keep forever worthy of the saving. Well, as I reckon you know, I lost that election. I fell into a deep melancholy. Bad enough I didn't want to continue with my law practice, and I even asked Billy Herndon, my partner, if he'd take my pocket knife away from me, lest I do something foolish with it. But you know what? What I saw as the end of my public career, others saw as the beginning. You see, folks started coming to me telling me that I had gained national attention, even in my loss to Stephen Douglas. They told me that I could have the 1860 Republican presidential nomination because they said I was the one man who could stop the growth of slavery. And so say this union. Well, I can't very well stand up here in front of you and tell you I'm not an ambitious man, can I? No one knows until that presidential grub starts gnawing at him just how deep it'll get until he's tried it. Well, I won the 1860 Republican presidential nomination, and with the United Party behind me, and my opponents split up into factions, just as our nation was threatening to split up. I won the election in November. But within days of that election, Southern legislators began to vote unconstitutionally, illegally, for secession, forming the so-called Confederate States of America. For the first weeks of this administration, we worked night and day trying to resolve this conflict without bloodshed. But when rebel troops in South Carolina bombarded Fort Sumter and Charleston Harbor, the war began. You remember those days. Some folks acted like they've been looking forward to it. It's all going to be over quick and easy. They said nobody really hurt. You know, the only thing that happened quickly and easily is the story of this rebellion became a chronicle of political wrangling and military setback. I put a fellow named McClellan in charge of the army, and for months he would not move, despite my urging. When he finally got going, he did get his army close enough to Richmond, Virginia, the rebel capital, that they could hear the church bells ringing on Sunday morning. And then the fighting started. And our boys did well. But McClellan, he retreated after every victory that he gained. I was back and every member of my cabinet thought he could do this job better than I was doing it. Half the members of Congress, they scoffed at me. You see, I could not gain the full support of the considerable number of abolitionists in the Congress who controlled the balance of power unless I were to free the slaves. But even if I'd had the power to end slavery, which I did not, I couldn't free anybody unless we won this war. And for the first year and a half of this conflict, if I'd made any move to end slavery, the 4 slaveholding states that stayed with the Union, they'd have quit and joined the other side. We'd have lost this war. That was back when I was telling anybody who'd listened to me that I hoped throughout this conflict to have God on my side, but I had to have Kentucky. We were certainly in no great danger of winning the war back then. Month after month, thousands of our boys were dying. I had men who called themselves generals, men I had appointed. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, in a personal way it did. My son Willie, he 11 years old, he got a fever in the White House. Boys get fevers, but it didn't come down. My wife and I we sat up every night with him. But he died. Forgive me. I received a letter from Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist, himself a former slave. And he wrote to me, "You fight this war with only one hand, Mr. Lincoln. The Negro is the key to the situation, the pivot on which the whole rebellion turns. Teach the rebels and traitors that the price they are to pay for their attempt to abolish this government must be the abolishment of slavery." I knew he was right, and I decided that the time had come. Now, as I said, I had no authority to end slavery. But as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and the Navy, I did have the authority, I strongly believed, to deny rebels any resource that furthered their ability to oppose this people's government. So in September of 1862, a year and a half into the conflict, I issued a proclamation of emancipation, not ending slavery, but freeing all slaves who lived in areas controlled by the rebels. Now, I was painfully aware that this did not free anyone currently under our control, but only those who were not under our control. But this was all I could do, and I did it. Some folks say that I'm a slow walker. Well, I may be, but I don't have to walk back. Well, the howling started right away. Some folks said I should have freed all the slaves. They didn't care what the Constitution said. And others, well, they told me I had exceeded my authority even with this measure. They called me a tyrant, a dictator. And, well, the press weighed in. I hope I won't be stepping on anybody's toes if I read a couple of selections, but I'll tell you what, you'll forgive me for reading it, I'll forgive you for writing it. How's that? Baltimore Sun. This president and his administration are now adrift on a current of radical fanaticism. New York Herald. Here. A cowardly tyrant who now disgraces the chair of Washington and Jefferson could any day have peace and restoration of the Union, and he would have, only he insists on continuing this war merely to free the slaves. Merely to free the slaves. There was this from a soldier of the Union armies. It is no longer the Union as it was that is to be reestablished, but the Union as it should be, washed clean of its original sin. We are no longer merely the soldiers of a political controversy. We are now the missionaries of a great work of redemption. We had looked for greater meaning in this terrible war. We've found that while we thought we were doing one thing, we were in fact doing something else. Now, that's when I began to realize what I'd known all along. That what had begun as a conflict over union had become a revolution over men's souls. From that day on, this was altogether a new war. And yet, it seemed like nothing had changed. Here in the East, particularly, where there's so much attention focused, our armies knew nothing but defeat. I finally fired McClellan, told him he had the slows. Replaced him late in 1862 with Ambrose Burnside, one of his commanders. And Burnside turned out to be a disaster. Or just a few months after I appointed him, I had to relieve him of command and replace him with General Joseph Hooker. And fighting Joe Hooker, he was just a disaster of another kind. Just months after I appointed him, in the summer of 1863, I had to relieve him of command and replace him with General George Meade. And now General Lee, he took his rebel army across the Potomac into the north, and he disappeared. Anybody who was in Washington here back then remembers the tension in this city so heavy you could hardly breathe. But our soldiers, our boys, they had a new spirit. They didn't care who was general anymore. They knew that a defeat at this point would mean the end of the war, end of our union. And defended now their homes and their families. They were determined that this should not happen. Yeah, the two armies finally stumbled into each other just across the Pennsylvania state line in a little town called Gettysburg, and then they fought for 3 days with this union hanging by a thread every moment of that fight, until finally on the last day of that battle, for the first time in this war, our boys sent the main attacking force of General Lee's army running from the field. But the cost. 8,000 men dead in 3 days. The cemetery was laid out in the hills above Gettysburg, with the boys, north and south, laid to rest side by side. And in the fall of that year, in November of 1863, a great dedication to that cemetery was planned. The finest orator of our day, Edward Everett, he was called up to express the solemn pride of the nation as a sort of afterthought. The organizers asked me if I wanted to come up from Washington and how they put it, deliver a few appropriate remarks. They were hoping I would say no, as I would not have been popular. But I told them yes, for I had something to say. After Edward Everett had spoken for over 2 hours, I stood up. "47 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate. We cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggle here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, to be dedicated here. The unfinished work which they who have fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us here to be so dedicated to that great task remaining before us, that from these other dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, and that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. You know, I dream often that I am on a ship which is broken loose from its moorings. A ship of which I am the captain, but I cannot steer it. It seems that in any contest, any great contest of arms, both sides claim to be acting in accordance with God's will, but God can't be both for and against the same thing at the same time, can he? By his mere power, he could have saved or destroyed this union without a human contest. But the contest began, and having begun, continues to achieve some great purpose that we do not fully understand. Boston Globe. It is the vacillation and indecision of the president that is the real reason why our armies have not succeeded in the destruction of the enemy. Even members of his own cabinet, including Secretary of War Stanton, consider him nothing more than a backwoods fool. Did Stanton call me a fool? Well, I'd better go have a long talk with him, because Stanton's usually right. You know, when I was a young man, I had only one distinction, of which I was very proud. I was the ugliest man in our county. And then I found out that another family had moved in, and the father of that family, well, he was out to give me a run for my money. You know, what was I going to do? I grabbed a mule and a shotgun, that's what I did, and went out to greet him. I found him, he's out, you know, plowing in his field back. And he looks up at me, well, it's mighty neighborly of you to come along here and greet a new family. But I am made a little uneasy by that shotgun, sir. What exactly is your purpose? And I told him, I have always been the ugliest man in my county, and I can see right now you are going to take my place. So I've come out to shoot you. And the feller says, well, I'm beginning to think he ain't so neighborly after all. But the truth of it is, if I'm uglier than you are, go ahead and shoot. Oh, I laugh because I must not weep. That's all. That's all. Well, as the fall of 1863 turned into the winter and then the spring of 64, that great victory at Gettysburg seemed like nothing more than a tantalizing glimmer of light in a world of gloom. My friends, not to mention my enemies, they told me that I could not win re-election in the fall. I agreed with that assessment. I figured that when election day rolled around, folks in this country were going to send me packing back to Springfield, where I would once again be privileged to take up the practice of law. But just last summer, as you'll recall, late in the summer of 1864, the fortunes of our armies on the field of battle took a tremendous turn for the better. And for the first time, people thought, well, maybe they could see an end to this war coming. So when November rolled around, they decided they wanted me to stay. And I reckoned, well, that's what they wanted me to do. I was supposed to better do it. You know, one newspaper put it, is anybody here from Harper's Weekly? Well, Harper's Weekly put it, long Abraham Lincoln, a little longer. Well, just a couple of weeks ago, as you know, I put together some remarks for the ceremony of my second inauguration. No, I think a lot of people were expecting me to hit a note of triumph in that speech. To say we were about to win this war because we were right. And God was, after all, on our side. Not much thought about whether we were on God's side, was there? Well, I think that's the sort of speech people expected me to give. But I gave them this one instead. At my first appearance to take the oath of the presidential office 4 years ago, all thoughts were anxiously directed to an impending civil war. All dreaded it. All sought to avert it. But one side would make war rather than let the nation survive. And the other side would accept war rather than let it perish. And the war came. 1/8 of the whole population were colored slaves, not distributed evenly over the Union, but localized in the southern part of it. These slaves constituted a peculiar and powerful interest, and all knew that this interest was somehow the cause of the war. Both sides read the same Bible, and they pray to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other. The prayers of both could not be answered. The prayers of neither has been answered fully. Woe unto the world because of offenses, says the Bible, but woe to that man by whom the offense comes. If we shall suppose that American slavery is one of those offenses which in the providence of God must needs come, but having continued through his appointed time, he now wills to remove, and he gives to both North and South this terrible war as the woe due to those by whom the offense came. Shall we discern therein any departure from those divine attributes which the believers in the living God always ascribe to him? Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet if God wills it to continue until all of the wealth piled up by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn by the lash shall be paid with another drawn by the sword, as was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on in the work we have begun. Let us bind up the Union. Let us care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan. Let us do all we can to achieve and cherish a just and a lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. Well, in the last week we have seen dramatic events with the surrender of General Lee's army in Virginia on Sunday, the surrender of General Johnston's army in North Carolina expected hourly. This war is essentially over. This nation is something new now. Something that could not have been before. Maybe we have finally washed away something of our original sin, and we can stand newborn and redeemed. Maybe because of this new birth, God will find a way to forgive us. Now, I said I didn't want to yammer on for very long, and I've been talking for I don't know how long. Please forgive me. I know that your readers are waiting for news from the Capitol with the end of the war, as we so dearly hope, nearly upon us. And so with your readers in mind, I'll take your questions. Who has a question for the President? Yes.
Please, sir, don't go to the theater tonight.
Well, I very much enjoy going to the theater. I enjoy the opera very much, and enjoy Shakespeare and the comedies. They help me take my mind off of it occasionally. And we're scheduled to go a little bit later this week. Yes, yes, ma'am. Hi. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. If you liked my speech, thank you very much. Yes, sir.
If you go into any theater, how about if you don't go to the Fords? I've heard that there's been a lot of murders there.
I don't know about that. I think they're mainly on stage, the murders at the Ford's Theater. But we hope to go a little later on. Yes, ma'am.
What do you feel is your greatest accomplishment and your deepest regret?
My greatest accomplishment, my deepest regret, I suspect are very closely tied together. And that is this terrible war has occurred. We are but instruments of God's will. And I have found myself as such, without a full understanding of what it is I'm doing. I regret very much the hundreds of thousands of deaths this war has brought, the sadness and the destruction. But if anything has been accomplished, we've come to a deeper understanding of what this nation is about. By liberating the slaves, as we will with the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which is now on its way to the states to be ratified, we are liberating ourselves. You know, it's often said that there is no greater prisoner than the warden. And maybe there is no greater slave than the slave owners. And as I said in my speech, we all share responsibility for this. The woe has come to us too. For our part, we've had to play in that. So my greatest regret and my greatest accomplishment are so closely tied together. Yes, sir.
What do you believe has been the driving force in your passion to do what you've accomplished? What was it in your life that brought about the conviction of the drive that's in you to accomplish what you've accomplished? Did it come from your parents? What?
I do not know the answer to that precisely. I know my law partner, Billy Herndon, he has said that my ambition is a little machine that never stops running. But I have not been ambitious for myself. I see myself as only the embodiment in this moment of great traditions, of what this country has been and should be, what it can be. And I have become, as I said, an instrument of God's will in this, one that does not fully understand what it is I have to do. And I guess I just take my consolation and my thanks for being such a tool. Yes, sir.
How bad did you feel for the slaves?
How badly did I feel for the slaves? As a young man, I had had no experience of seeing slaves in Illinois, Indiana. I don't recall having seen any as a boy in Kentucky, though slavery was legal there. But as a young man, I was hired to run a raft down to New Orleans with another young fella. And we got down to New Orleans after floating down the Mississippi. And before we came back, I happened to go by the slave markets. And I saw men and women and children being sold just like so many horses, tied together like fish on a line. Nothing in my life has depressed me so as seeing those slave markets in New Orleans. Yes, sir.
Just before this terrible war, the state of Oregon voted to be a free state instead of slave state, but they also voted to exclude free blacks from living there.
Yeah.
Now you have 4 million really free people who for 250 years have not been access the Homestead Act so they can be welcome across the West and be welcome in the North and have the full rights of citizenship going forward.
Exactly the question of the moment. How are we going to make citizens, or allowed to be citizens? Millions of men and women and children who've been, until this week, have been slaves. We've started a Freedmen's Bureau. We're building schools and other institutions. These are people with skills. They've been enslaved to use them, but they are real skills, and I believe strongly they will work better for pay in freedom than they have been as slaves. As you know, there are no laws from the federal government saying who can vote and who can't. That is entirely up to the states, but having already established loyal governments in Tennessee and Louisiana, I have asked the governors of those states to please consider allowing, at the very least, educated or those who have been veterans among the former slaves, let them vote. In Oregon, yes, I've heard of this, and I hope they'll change their minds. Perhaps they have some personal animus. Perhaps you know, in 1848, just as I was leaving the Congress, I was offered the governorship of the territory of Oregon, which I promptly turned down. People ask me why, and I've cited various instances, but the truth is, if anybody thinks that Mary Lincoln is going to cross the plains in a covered wagon, they've got another thing coming. So I stayed in Illinois. I knew I was taken care of.
There's a lot of disagreement across the nation about the reason that the southern states try to secede, but is there any doubt in your mind about what their reason was?
Yeah, very little doubt in my mind about what this was about. Some of the legislatures, they never took the issue to the voters. Legislators said that they were all for states' rights, for freedom and states' rights. Well, what freedom did they want? They wanted the freedom to enslave others. What sort of principle is that? What sort of right is that? Demanding the right to make chattel, to make property out of other human beings. The Constitution, which starts, we the people of the United States, not we the states, we the people, is a contract among us. And just like any contract, if I may speak like a lawyer for a moment, any contract, you don't get out of that contract unless the other people who are members to it let you. And we weren't about to do that. No founding document of any nation allows for its dissolution. Also, I was elected. I took a solemn oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Union. And a lot of things were said, but finally, the one point that could not be reconciled, it wasn't a national bank, it wasn't tariffs, it was slavery. And many Southerners cited it themselves when they voted to secede. Yes, miss, do you have a question?
Why is there war?
Why is there war? Is there any better question than that? Because we can't find a way to resolve our disagreements.
I was wondering if there was a war. I was thinking, was there a war or not?
Yes, there was a terrible civil war. And,
I don't know.
yes, and because we can't find a way to resolve our conflicts other than through collective massacre.
And my mom said it's because of slavery.
Well, yes, this particular war, as we were saying, yes, I believe so. That was the issue we could not reconcile, was over slavery. And because I was pledged to protect the Union, and they wouldn't let go of their slaves. And
I agree.
They thought, as I mentioned earlier, it's just been understood that if we stopped the growth of slavery at any point, it was going to die on its own. And Southerners, they knew my stand on slavery, that I wanted to stop its growth. And they saw that as some great threat to themselves. Yes, sir.
I'm confused because
Join me
I believe that our Constitution guarantees the individual states the right to secede from the Union. And I'd like some clarification.
Clarification, no, there is no statement whatsoever in the Constitution saying that the states have the right to secede. If there had been such a proposal put forth at the convention in Philadelphia, I do believe it would have been dismissed. You don't put a union together and at the same time in its founding document to put in a trap door that will destroy that union. Now, much has been made of the reserved rights of the states, but there are implied rights too. Some rights that are so clear, some provisions of the Constitution that are so clear they hardly need to be stated directly. I believe very strongly, my party believed very strongly, that's why I became a member of the Republican Party, that slavery was wrong. And we wanted to stop the growth of slavery. But we also believed firmly in this nation, in the United States of America. And so when some of the states began to vote for secession, it was clearly unconstitutional. Now, they saw it differently, and that is at the root of this conflict. But no, there is no provision in the Constitution allowing for secession. Yes, sir.
You have a few years left, of course, in your second term now. What are your plans for the South? Would you want to punish the South, and if so, how? Or would you want to build the South back up, and if so, what are your plans?
Well, it begins with this question of secession. It was unconstitutional, so these states never seceded. They've always been part of the United States of America. They never left. They're our fellow citizens. And it is our job as a nation to put ourselves back together. As for punishment, you know, I'm reminded of the story of the Irishman who walked into a bar. And he told the bartender, much to the bartender's shock, that he was on the wagon now. He didn't want to touch any alcohol. He says, just a cup of coffee for me, please. And the bartender said, you're right about that, Penny? You sure? He said, oh, absolutely, just a cup of coffee for me. Though if you were to slip a little brandy into it, unbeknownst to me, well, that would be all right. And so with some of the leaders that I've been told I should hang from a sour apple tree, should get away unbeknownst to me, that would be all right too. But we've got to put this country back together. We are not to take our vengeance on the people of the South. My fear is if we do that, they will take their vengeance on the newly freed slaves, and I do not want to see that. You know, during this war, we've accomplished other things. The Homestead Act's been referred to, also the Morrill Act, which has established colleges in many of the territories and states particularly, to teach agriculture, mining, and other subjects. We've also been building, and it should be done within a couple of years, a transcontinental railway, bringing this unit together east and west, just as we're reunited in north and south. There'll be a lot of land that needs to be taken care of, and I think maybe some of the former slaves will find some of that land for themselves. I dearly hope. Just one or two more questions, if there are any. Yes, ma'am.
Would you share with us a favorite childhood memory of yours?
Oh, favorite one. I don't know about favorite. One time I took my sister, raised her up, and had her. I'm sorry, no, it was my sister's. It was my sister's child. I raised her up, him up, and his feet were muddy, and we made footprints along the ceiling of our little cabin. And my folks came in. Couldn't imagine how footprints were up there on the ceiling. A favorite memory, perhaps. I grew up out in the woods, on the farms. I didn't like farm work, and my father would hire me out as a farm worker without pay. But I also had many a good time. Many a good time. Yes, ma'am.
Did you like being in New Salem?
New Salem was fine, a little town, New Salem, Illinois, where my family settled when I was young. And I would make the occasional speech up on a stump. That's where I first ran for the state legislature. I lost the first time around, but in every town where I was personally known, I won the vote. And when I ran again 4 years later, I won there. And New Salem was fine, but when I got elected, I lived most of the time in Springfield from now on out. Well, this young man gets the last question. Such a handsome fellow, I can't very well turn you down. Yes.
If the South succeeded, didn't they need someone to be in charge to?
Yes. Yes, well, when the South seceded illegally, they voted Jefferson Davis, who had been a member of the cabinet of the United States, to be their president.
The other thing was that if Jefferson Davis went against you, why didn't you punish him at least?
Well, we haven't caught him yet, for one thing. And as I said, if he should slip away, unbeknownst to me, that would be fine. If we do catch him, well, we'll have to face that. I'm not much for harsh punishments. Among many others, this has been a political issue, and I've always said the statute of limitations on political fights should be very, very short. You'll have to forgive me now, my duties call me elsewhere. I'm so weary. I'm very weary, but there's so much I need to do before I can take that last train ride home. I must leave you now. Goodbye.